Welcome back to another Kray video. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss any videos. And for people really into the Krays, join our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London, where you can find stuff possibly unavailable anywhere else. We're an established group and very friendly. The link is in the YouTube description section.
Welcome back to another episode, guys. We continue on with the story. I loved hearing Grandad Kray's stories, so I was over the moon every time he asked me to help him with his second-hand clothes business, in the hope of hearing another. I'd be sent up to Shoreditch on a Sunday morning to collect a barrow from a man who hired them out. I'd have to wait, while the elderly white-haired man who had a club foot slowly undid the chain that ran through the wheels of a line of barrows. Back at Grandad's house in Gorsuch Street, I'd run up and down the stairs, fetching and loading up black cloth bags from the back room that were filled with the gear that he'd bought on his travels. With the barrow piled high, I'd run with it all the way to Brick Lane, using the effort as extra training for my legs, chest and general stamina. Once I got the barrow parked at our usual pitch outside a shoe shop, it would be my job to set out the clothes ready for sale. You name it, we had it. Shoes, suits, shirts, waistcoats, overcoats and ex-army greatcoats, all good quality and in high demand by the punters. When Grandad went off for a tea break, he'd leave me in charge and I'd enjoy the haggling, bartering and banter that was part of the fun of market trading. If business was brisk while he was gone, I'd feel proud to hand over a pile of 10-bob notes, half-crowns and shillings. When there were slack periods, I would take an idea I'd picked up from a film on the life of the great fighter Jim Corbett. Mingling among the densely packed crowd, I'd swerve and sidestep around the people in the market without touching them, which I found was an interesting way of improving my footwork and sense of balance. Working with Grandad was a lot of fun, and I never expected or looked for any reward, but at the end of the day, he would always insist on giving me 7 shillings and sixpence, which for a lad of 13 was very good money. Though I spent a lot of time with Farvey, I suppose because he was just over the back, I spent more with Grandad Lee. I'd always be in and out to see what he was up to next, because although he wasn't an educated man, he had a wonderful talent with his hands. He was always bringing broken instruments back from the market, which he'd picked up for a couple of shillings, and an hour or two after he got them home, he'd be knocking a tune out, whether it was a violin, banjo or an accordion. He even built a car in the upstairs bedroom of his house, but had to dismantle it to get it outside. He had green fingers too, and one year he received first prize in a competition run by the local council for best window box display. 2 nights later he threw every flower pot down into the street at a load of yobos making a racket. And as a family, one of the things we looked forward to the most was the annual fruit-picking holiday. This traditional exodus to the fields and orchards of Kent, in Surrey, Cambridge and many other parts of the country had been made by Londoners for generation after generation. Long before the season started, advertisements would appear in the local press inviting families to apply for work. As everyone from grandparents down to sturdy 5-year-olds could add some contribution to the collective effort to the good amount of money we could earn, so naturally they jumped at the chance to get away from the grimy streets of the East End. And although the work was hard and the hours long, the 6 to 8 weeks spent in a rural environment was the highlight of the year. Our first working trip was to a farm in the fens of Cambridge near the town of Wisbeach. Ron, our parents and I were accommodated in long wooden army-type huts, along with all the other workers, in a field near the farmhouse. Inside they were partitioned off with plasterboard walls to give each family some privacy. It wasn't long before Ron and I started to need some entertainment, so to keep ourselves occupied, we got the gloves on. We got stuck into each other, and getting a bit carried away, we ended up splitting some of the panels as we crashed each other into them. That got us a telling off from Mum, so we stuck to sparring outside after that. The work of picking strawberries was back-breaking and monotonous, but we loved being out in the fresh air. With the younger workers, there was a certain amount of friendly rivalry going on as to who could fill the most baskets. We were only paid for the amount we picked, so these races helped us towards a good payout at the end of the day. If I remember correctly, each filled punnet was worth about 9p, so collectively our family could pick up £8 or £9 for a week's work on the Saturday night. Sometimes we would be put onto gooseberry picking, which was not half as back-breaking, but could be painful if your leather gloves were left in the hut. The following year, we turned up with our parents and a friend, Pat Butler, to find there was no room in the huts for us boys. So that evening in the pub, Mum approached the gangmaster, Bill Shippey, and asked him what we could do. Without hesitation, he said the three of us could move into his home for the season, which began a friendship with Bill and his wife Mavis that has lasted to the present day. Any listener who imagines that because of our reputation, the Kray twins ran riot and generally terrorized the people of Wisbech would be surprised to hear how Bill's wife described us. On a recent visit to me here at Maidstone, Mavis, who for some reason I've always called Mary, told me that Ron and I had been quiet, considerate and polite. She also reminded me of how we would always insist on clearing the table after our meals, or were forever offering to make her cups of tea. I learned too with great pleasure that one of Bill's most treasured possessions is a wooden musical box in the shape of a house that Ron and I made between us and sent to them in the very early years of our prison sentence. One incident that happened while we were there literally left its mark. Ron, Pat and I went camping nearby on our Sunday off. Everything went great until darkness fell. As one of us lit a candle for a bit of light, the whole tent went up in flames. In the panic, I scrambled out, fell against a barbed wire fence and severely lacerated my back. It was incredibly painful, and I still bear the scars. Years later, when I was sent to prison for grievous bodily harm, this incident came back to mind. One of the first things that happens once you are behind the door is a medical examination. After the indignity of having my testicles cupped by the doctor while being told to cough, and the even worse indignity of him rooting through my pubic hair for lice or crabs, he asked me to turn round. He was quiet for a moment, then touching the scars from the barbed wire, he inquired, "Ever been flogged, Kray?" I replied, "No, sir." His sneering reply was, "It's a great pity." Back in the East End, like all kids, the end of our childhood was signalled by starting work for a living full-time. Apart from working towards being boxing world champions, neither of us had any ambition as far as a career, so we were prepared to tackle anything that would bring in a few quid. Uncle Joe fixed up our first job. He was working down Billingsgate Fish Market, and one of the governors asked him if he knew of a boy who'd be willing to do the running around. Joe said, "Well, I do as it happens, but it's not one boy, it's two. They're my twin nephews and look so much alike I can't tell the difference, so I wouldn't know which one to ask." The boss said he could find work for the both of us. So Ron was taken on in the Haddock Market as an empty boy for the firm Farron and Barrow, where his job was to collect empty fish boxes, while I was sent to the shop in Thames Street as a junior salesman, supposedly to learn the business of selling to customers. I hadn't been there long when, after making up a large parcel of fish for a man, he said, "Do me a favour, son, will you take it and put it in my motor? The cart minder will tell you which one it is, and I'll have to see you later because I've no change on me." I did as he asked and thought no more of it. The following week he came back again and asked me to deliver another order. He was a customer, so I had to be polite, but I wasn't going to be done. I said, "You promised you'd see me all right the last time I ran an errand for you, but you haven't come across." He gave me a strange look as though I wasn't all there and said, "What's up with you? I squared up the day after when I saw you down the market." Then the penny dropped. He'd seen Ron and paid him out, thinking he was me. When I caught up with my brother, I asked him if some bloke had given him money, and he said, yes, £0.50. When I said it was mine and wanted it, he told me to fuck off. So that was the end of that. I was a bit put out at the time, but I could see the humour in it. I'd always loved the atmosphere of Billingsgate Market, and even as a little kid wanted to work there one day. The toing and froing and the bustle and hurry up of the porters as they raced around pushing barrows laden with boxes of fish, or else wearing large leather hats on which they'd balance a number of boxes on their head. They called this nutting the fish. The air was always full of noise. Shouts of the men mingled with the shrieks and cries of the gulls as they swept in from the nearby Thames, snatched a fish, then steered away with a haunting squawk of triumph. The smells, the clutter and the camaraderie of the people who worked there gave a zest to the day that I find difficult to convey to those who have never experienced it. It was also a mysterious place. Early one morning, long before I started travelling to market with him, Uncle Joe had been driving his cart along when he noticed that the surface of the road ahead seemed to be moving. At first, he thought his eyes were playing up, but as he reined in the horses and slowed down, thousands upon thousands of rats converged on him. They covered the full width of the road and as far as he could see in front of him. What he found unnerving was their sense of purpose, an utter silence as they surged around the wheels and hooves of the horses. Eventually they passed him, but even today he has never understood what the phenomenon signified. This strange and exciting place was so enticing to me as a teenager that I'd be waiting outside the front door listening for the sound of Uncle Joe's horse and cart approaching, even though it might be as early as 3 in the morning. Good-looking, well-built and 6'3", my uncle was an imposing figure. I used to feel quite proud sitting up in the cart with him as we glided through the cobbled streets. Sometimes he'd be driving a double-horse cart, but other times, depending on the load, he might have 4 sturdy animals in the shafts. Although I was just starting my day's work, he had already been to one of the stations and picked up boxes of mackerel, herring or skate. The novelty would wear off in time, but in the early weeks, I'd sit high up behind the steaming horses and imagine I was one of the American settlers heading into the West on my stagecoach. When we arrived at the market, the first thing we'd have to do would be to get the cart safely parked up and left for unloading. The second thing, and the best, was to head for the little cafe on the hill for cheese rolls or dripping on toast with big mugs of tea. Either inside the cafe or passing the window, we'd often see famous old boxers from the past who, now that their glory had passed them by, were trying to earn a living. And though we didn't know it at the time, we'd also see famous names yet to come. 2 such soon-to-be famous men were George and Billy Walker. George fought for the title of light heavyweight champion of Great Britain against Freddie Powell of Wales. His brother Billy was as game as they come and had many great fights in the heavyweight class. Unfortunately, the British title he aimed for always eluded him, but in later years he turned his hand to acting and was very successful. After a few months down the market, I started getting restless. I still enjoyed the work, but felt like a change. So Ron and I turned it in and began looking around for what would be the second in a long line of short-lived casual jobs. We got fixed up in the area of Bow Canal as labourers and found the hard physical labour suited us both. It wasn't long before our fitness and stamina reached a new peak, and due to the fact that we spent day after day breaking rocks with sledgehammers, our muscles turned to iron, a great asset in tackling the aggravation that was slowly creeping into our lives. Violence was never to be far away. One day, a fella at work called Ginger Davy got a bit gobby with Ron. Being a few years older and being more experienced in the work we were doing must have given him the idea that he could take the piss. But looking at Ron's face, I could see the bloke had made a big mistake. He threw a couple of words at Ron, then with a smirk on his face, climbed up a long ramp and carried on working under a lean-to shed. I knew it wasn't finished, so as I was working I kept an eye on Ron. Sure enough, 10 minutes later I saw him creep up the ramp, pick up a lump of rock and smash Davy over the head with it. Down he went. I ran up the ramp and fortunately got to the shed quick enough to grapple with my brother and talk him out of inflicting more injury with the rock. Davy was stunned and bleeding profusely, but with his bottle completely gone, I was able to pacify the situation without further repercussions. For the rest of our short stay in that job, he made sure he kept as far away from us as possible. We soon moved on, still by the canal in an area of Queensbury Road, but this time we worked on a casual basis under the direction of Ganger Big Tommy Cheshire, a very large man, well known for being more than capable of looking after himself. Again, this work was physically demanding as we were unloading long, heavy planks of wood from barges to the quayside. With leather shoulder pads as protection against chafing and grazes, we'd walk up and down the gangplank all day like robots. In the end, the boring monotony of the work and the lousy wages became too much to bear, so it was off to Truman's Brewery. As far as work went, the only difference was a change of scenery, because endlessly stacking crates of beer turned out to be equally boring. It had its perks though. Officially, we were allowed a couple of pints of brown or light ale a day. Needless to say, the official quota was totally ignored, which helped the hours pass in a pleasant daze. Larceny at work was part of life, and a short spell in the tin factory at the back of Hackney Road supplied family and neighbours with enough kettles to last a lifetime. But as far as earning decent money from this bit of thieving went, there was a limit to how many kettles and teapots could be smuggled out. But when I joined a firm of scent makers in Bishopsgate, I hit a little gold mine. The size of the product allowed me to walk through the gates with a tidy sum in the form of contraband hidden in every pocket and even stuck down my pants. At Christmas time, I could hardly keep up with the orders from stall holders who didn't question where the goods were coming from. Better still was Joyce's Lingerie down Old Street in Shoreditch. This firm sold ladies' underwear wholesale. At first I was in the packing department making up parcels for dispatch. Once I got the hang of a bit of sleight of hand, most of the parcels were going out a bit light. Eventually, I was earning more from nicking than I was being paid in wages. Soon an opportunity arose to earn some real money. I was asked to take over the job of driver's mate on the delivery lorry. The driver was an easygoing fella in his 40s who, like everyone else, was struggling to make a living on piss-poor wages. So when I suggested we divert the load for our own ends, he jumped at the idea. The safest way to approach the theft was to drive straight to a lockup owned by a relation of mine and unload the gear. Once that was done, all we had to do was leave the lorry in the car park of a transport cafe and go for a meal. An hour later go out to the lorry and then run back inside shouting that some bastard has nicked our load. We deserved Oscars. I think the old Bill had a fair idea of what had gone down, but they had nothing to go on and had to accept our story. My relations squared us up and I cut it 60-40 in my favour with the driver. After all, it was my idea and nobody was hurt except the insurance company. I was quite proud of how I handled this step up from petty theft, but was not aware that a scam of this nature would pale into insignificance against what I would undertake in the future. That brings us to the end of this part, friends. I'd like to thank you for listening and I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.